All right, good morning. It's good to see everybody this morning. Hope everyone had a wonderful spring break this past week. That was a joke. My grandpa has such a dry humor that when he preaches, he raises his hand when he gives a joke. I should start doing that. No, hopefully you had a good Christmas. Hopefully you got to enjoy some time with people that you love and care about. Pray you had some time that was encouraging, and it's warm outside. But I guess the cold is coming. Some of you have dressed like it's colder than it is, just saying, but it's coming. If you have your Bible, if you want to open to Matthew chapter 5, we're still in there together. We'll be in there today. And we will continue on through the Gospel of Matthew. If I sound a little weird, I feel so much better than I sound. We were just talking about how this thing kind of stays with you, but feels much better than I sound. So as we go through the Beatitudes, looking at these characteristics of the kingdom that are upside down, opposite, contrary to the world and its kingdom. Look at that. I said that. Now I need to clear my throat. Excuse me. Okay, just kidding. Looking at these characteristics of the kingdom, today we're on one that I think is kind of obvious. Man. Never say anything about how you feel your throat. The complete opposite just happens immediately. When I clear my throat, does it make you want to clear your throat, by the way? Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It's weird how that works. It is like dominoes, isn't it? In Matthew chapter 5 and verse 8, Jesus said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." And we've looked at these qualities of the kingdom and the people in the kingdom and how they're so different from the world. I think it's obvious to all of us that in our world, one thing that is desperately needed and that is lacking is peace. You know, there's a reason every pageant girl always answers, "What do you want?" World peace. You know, it's always needed. You think about our world today, and there's a need for peace everywhere. You think about, I don't know if you know this, did you know that there are 59 active state-based conflicts globally? 10 or 12 of those are considered major wars, which are conflicts that involve or have or cause more than 1,000 deaths a year. You likely think of certain conflicts like Ukraine and Russia recently. You think of the Middle East and the ongoing conflicts that are there. Did you know that 92 countries are involved in conflicts beyond their own border? That is a post-World War II high. There's a need for peace on a grand scale all over. There's a lack of peace just internally or within our own country. There are internal fractures. You have the rise of extremism. You have high-profile assassinations. You have violence of many kinds, shootings and things like that. You have the polarization of people, not just necessarily physical violence, but you even have just a lack of peace between people. You have now us versus them, and you can think about that politically, religiously, and in many different ways, but there's that, and there's a lack of peace in that way. You think about homes. There's a desperate need for peace within homes, isn't there? There are marriages where yelling fits of anger and screaming and even physical like violence are normal. You have homes where it's cold, where it's just cold, where people walk around like they're on eggshells, and there's a need for peace. You have children who grow up without security, who grow up in this environment. You have parents and children who fight. You have all kinds of things going on. There's a desperate need for peace in really every area of this world. And if it was up to mankind to fix it, would it all be fixed? No. And in fact, if you want the evidence of that, look at the world right now. Because mankind truly can't bring about lasting peace on its own with all of its work. You know, everyone wants to have peace, everyone says it, everyone desires it, but yet we don't have it. Because it's going to take someone far more than just a man or just mankind to bring about peace. So there's a desperate need of peace. And the reason why, I think, is stated in James chapter 4. And we kind of mentioned this passage a little bit last week, talking about pure of heart, or some of the verses in James. But in James 4, he says this: what causes quarrels and fights, and what causes fights among you? Like, what is the reason for conflict? What is the reason for division? What is the reason for separation between people? What's the source of all of these things? And he says, is it not this, that your passions are at war within you? He points to something not outside of them, but he points to something within them. That there is a selfish, fleshly passion within you as a person. This is speaking to some specific situations, but this is true of everybody. That it's these selfish desires, it's these passions in the heart of someone, in the inner man, that are causing all of this conflict and division. He goes on to say this, you desire and you do not have, so you what? You murder. You covet and you cannot obtain, so you fight and you quarrel. You do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. What it teaches us there is the reason we need peace, or the source of all the division and the issues that we see today, is because as people we're double-minded and we have these selfish desires and passions. I think this is a true statement, and a preacher that I really admire said this recently, but he says, almost all conflict comes from wanting something that we do not have. I don't know if you ever thought about that, but almost all conflict comes from wanting something we do not have. He gave a list, and it was very preachery because it all started with the same letter. But think about this. Like, we have conflict because we do not agree, and we want that. Like, I want you to see this situation the same way I do, right? And what happens if you don't? There's conflict often. Look at our world. I mean, is that not true today? Sometimes that's even true in the church. We have conflict when we don't see things the same way. We want our spouse, we want this person, our friend, our coworker, our brother or sister to see this the exact same way. When we don't get attention that we want, sometimes there's conflict. When people don't look at me or notice me or see what I'm doing, well, there's conflict. When we don't get the approval we want, when we do something or we say something and we don't get that kind of thumbs up, good job, rubber stamp of approval, sometimes there's conflict. We start to feel a certain way about people. When we don't get appreciation, right? When we feel like we're not seen or heard, or people are not grateful for all the things we're doing. When we don't get the admiration, when we don't get the affection that we want, or maybe it's because we want autonomy. We want to be able to choose and govern ourselves. And when these things don't happen, conflict happens. And when, there's healthy conflict in our life, healthy conflict in relationships. When it's handled the right way, conflict is inevitable. But yet there's unhealthy conflict, and often when we don't get these things, conflict arises, and then you start to see the fruits of that, where peace is destroyed. I mean, simply put, sin destroys peace. That's what it does. It separates us from God, where there's no longer peace between God and man, but yet it also destroys peace between men. And it's impossible for us, that's the point of Jesus, that we cannot bring peace on our own merit, but yet because of him, we can have peace. There's a verse I want to show you before we're kind of looking at verses about peace while we're looking at the Beatitudes, but Colossians chapter 1, verse 19 and 20 tells us this. Speaking about Jesus, it says, in him, Jesus, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. Jesus came, lived, and he died to reconcile all things to himself, to bring back people, to buy back people, to make them one again, to unite them with himself. Anything, he says here, on heaven and on earth, it can be reconciled. Anything touched by sin can be reconciled through Jesus. Jesus is a peacemaker. That's what his ministry was all about, was trying to bring about peace between God and mankind, but also between fellow man. He wanted to unite them all as one in his church. His ministry was a ministry of reconciliation, Paul would say, and it's a ministry that we've been handed. And so, if possible, Romans 12 says, so far as it depends upon us, we want to live peaceably with all people because our Lord was a peacemaker and he grants us peace with him. But he makes peace through the blood of the cross. And I want you to think about what that means, and we'll get back to it here in just a little bit about what it means to be a peacemaker based on Jesus making peace through the blood of his cross. But you look at Matthew chapter 5 and verse 8, I want you to notice what it does not say. It does not say, blessed are the peace lovers, for they shall be called sons of God. I think all of us agree that unity and peace are incredible, right? We all want that. Most of us, I think, would say we want that. But yet does he say, blessed are the peace lovers? Those people who think, yeah, peace is a good thing. No, because everyone, for the most part, agrees with that. It's not what he's talking about. You know what else he doesn't say? He doesn't say, blessed are the peacekeepers. You know what a peacekeeper is? The people who just, they will never say or do anything to stir up anything. They will never point out a conflict, try to handle a conflict. They are going to be quiet and silent as possible and never try to do anything because they just want to keep the what? Right, that's how it works. We should want to keep the peace. Paul would say in Ephesians 4, be eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bonds of peace. We want to keep people united and together. But the way we talk about keeping the peace isn't necessarily real peace sometimes. And it certainly isn't what Jesus is referring to here as a peacemaker. See, there's a difference between being a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. Peacekeepers avoid conflict to stay comfortable. I'm not going to touch it. I'm not going to deal with it. Certainly there are some good times in life where that's not a big deal. I'm just going to let that go. But they won't touch a subject. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to do anything. Just let it be. And peacemakers enter the conflict to bring healing. You think about Jesus. There was a lack of peace between God and man, and he didn't go, I'm just going to stay out of it. I'm just not going to approach the subject. I'm not going to try to deal with it. I'm not going to mention it to this person. I'm not going to do anything about it. That's not him. He entered into the mess. He entered into the conflict to bring about peace. That was his goal. He's not just a peacekeeper. He's a peacemaker. You know, peacekeepers, they react only when the other person changes. What I mean by that is, you know, you look at the life of Jesus. Jesus didn't behave in a way that was merely a reflection of how he was treated. Like sometimes what peacekeepers do is, and I say we because sometimes that's me too, but you know, when they act differently, then I'll act differently. Or depending on how they act, that will kind of make my decision of how I'm going to respond. That's not Jesus. He extended grace even when others remained hostile. While we were sinners, while we were enemies, Christ died for us. That wasn't just a peacekeeper, he was a peacemaker. He extended grace even when the other person remained hostile. Kind of more about this difference. You know, peacekeepers kind of deflect and they assign blame. It's their fault, it's on them, and I'm just going to ignore it and not deal with it, and I'm just going to kind of not really recognize or admit how it hurts and all of that. And yet peacemakers, they're willing to absorb pain to stop the cycle of hurt. I mean, that's what Jesus did. Willing to take some pain on his own behalf in order to bring about restoration and reconciliation to a relationship. That's why he came. That's why he went upon a cross, willing to absorb the punishment in order to bring about a better relationship. He wanted to break the cycle. Instead of, I'm going to hurt back, I'm going to retaliate, he extends grace, he absorbs some pain, he humbled himself. That's what he did. He chose to be the place or the person where it stopped. It stops with me. He's a peacemaker in that way. He's doing something to establish peace. You know, another difference between the two is peacekeepers, they try to polish the surface of the relationship, like kind of just the outside of it, but peacemakers try to transform the relationship into something new. Like Jesus wasn't just trying to resolve a conflict per se, he wanted to restore the heart in the relationship and the heart of a person. You know, it's not just let's just find a little resolution and move on, but let's actually restore and create this relationship. For example, you know, in World War I, there was this moment in 1914 called the Christmas, you know it, huh? The Christmas Truce of 1914. It was a momentary it was a moment of peace that happened between the Germans and the British, and there were some French and Belgian soldiers there too. But on Christmas Eve, you know, both sides had been kind of, I guess, you know, in your trenches 30 yards away from each other, they kind of have been shouting kind of jokes at each other, making fun of each other. And then some would sing some Christmas carols, and I guess the other side was singing some Christmas carols. And apparently there was an interview with one of these soldiers some years ago, and he said one German shouted out, "Tomorrow you no shoot, We no shoot. And on Christmas, that next day, there was no fighting. They apparently played football in Europe, American soccer. They sang, they talked, they joked. And you think, man, that's awesome, right? Right? What happened, you think, the next day? Isn't that sad? Is that really peacemaking? Or is that peacekeeping? Or is that really what the kind of peace Jesus is talking about? That's really sad. You can go sing with someone and talk and chat, and I can't imagine the life and the mind of a soldier and the task, by the way, so I don't envy them. But yet the next day, do you go back to shooting? In fact, there's been talks about the military and leaders after this kind of trying to keep this from happening because it kind of damages, I guess, a soldier's psyche and maybe their ability or desire to want to fight the other side, because you become kind of friendly with them and realize, oh, that's just a person who has parents back home or kids back home or a spouse back home. And so, that's a moment of peace, but that's not really restoring a relationship or making it better. That's not true peace. Jesus doesn't say, blessed are the peacekeepers. A lot of us are probably peacekeepers. He says, blessed are the peacemakers. There's action involved. It's something we go do. It involves our words, and it involves so many things. And I'll just say this is obvious, but he also doesn't say this, blessed are the troublemakers. Sometimes we brag about, oh, you're a little troublemaker. He doesn't say that either, by the way. That's obvious, but I'll throw it in there. In our life, if we're constantly causing strife and fights in our family and between people, that's not being a peacemaker. Like if we're a gossip and a slanderer, violent, if we're causing all kinds of issues in relationships constantly, we may be a troublemaker, not a peacemaker. And I go back to that verse. Yeah.
Category, perhaps, like maybe to riff on peacekeeper, not someone who's apathetic about it, but yet they try to enforce a peace, like a parent with two children, and those kids are always fighting, and that parent uses that authority to kind of enforce a false peace. And sometimes we can kind of set ourselves up as that authority for people that we have no business being that authority, and we create this fake peace by just being the police officer of whatever situation.
Yeah, it's kind of like which I understand why parents do that, by the way. But there is kind of sometimes maybe like a fake peace that we, in positions of authority, cause. You think about a situation, a policeman comes out, he separates the two to try to stop it, but did he create peace per se? Not necessarily. There's still a hatred there. There's still some feelings there. Jesus is trying to restore the heart to really bring about a true peace between people and in relationships. And it said that he made peace by the blood of his cross. Let me ask you this question. What does Jesus making peace through the cross tell us about the work of peacemaking? I just want you to think about that. And I want your answers here. But Jesus going to the cross, when it says that he made peace through the blood, what does that tell you and I about the work of peacemaking? Okay, there may be a price to pay. For Jesus, certainly there was a price to pay, wasn't there? There was the death upon the cross, the absorption of pain there. There was a price. I think he also paid the price just in his life, too. Did everyone love him as he tried to bring peace to people? No. There was some cost. It affected his life in numerous ways, but it's costly. Let me ask you, how might peacemaking be costly today? What might the cost be when you try to make peace with people?
Relationships.
Okay, expand on that.
Sometimes you're going to lose relationships.
Even when you try to fix them?
Yeah.
Yeah. You ever done that before? Ever happened to you? You try to go to someone to really work out a problem, to get there, to bring about real peace, and it just seems like it's not going to happen. You ever try to make peace with someone and the opposite happened? It felt like you went further away? Yeah, that sometimes, Jesus comes to earth to try to make peace with all men for God. Did all men leave this earth with a peaceful relationship with God? No, some went further away. Not the fault of Jesus, but just that's what happened. It's costly, and it affects relationships. Sometimes it costs relationships. It changes relationships, trying to make real peace instead of just kind of tiptoeing around, and there's not real peace there. What else does Jesus making peace through the cross tell us about the work of peacemaking?
You have to deny self sometimes to bring peace. And that's what Jesus did by taking up his cross. And a lot of times we want peace on our own terms, which is not really peacemaking.
Yeah, you absolutely have to deny self if you want to make peace. Why is that? Or how do you, what do you have to deny about yourself if you were to make peace? Like, let's say me and Richard have a huge fight. Richard, what do we fight about? Never mind, don't answer that. I'm not wearing a tie. How dare I? We got a big blow up. This happens every month, by the way. We get in the foyer, you guys all leave. He just yells at me and berates me. One time he hit me. I'm just kidding. We got a big blow up. We want to make peace. What do I have to deny about myself, or what does Richard have to deny about himself to actually make peace with each other? One, it's not about me. And we want it to be about us, don't we? We have selfish desires too. What are some things that we might want in that situation that we're going to have to let go of if we want to have peace?
You have to admit that you might be the one that's wrong.
Okay, I might be the one that's wrong. That's true. There's the president of Oklahoma Christian. He has these principles that he kind of lives by, and he used to share them with his sons. And I sat in one of these leadership classes, I think it was in Norman at Westside Church of Christ with him. And one of the things he always taught his son is to live by this idea of maybe the fault is mine. You know, to go into every situation thinking it could be that this is because of me, not just because of them. But typically, that's what we do, right? We say it's because of them, it's their fault. But if we're going to make peace, we might have to say, okay, how might this situation be because of me? How might I be involved in this? Maybe I'm wrong. What are some things we're going to have to let go of if we want to make peace with people? What? Our own selfish desires. And those might be things like, they better see everything the exact way I do. Or, I have to get everything I want, or it has to go completely my way. Or, they have to admit it was all there. You get the idea? Making peace. This is how that works. Sometimes it's, well, we'll make peace if they, and there's the whole list. I get the approval, the attention, the admiration, all those things I wanted. Making peace, you have to let go of some things yourself. You have to deny self. Okay, that's not what's most important. It's this relationship and making peace, true peace here. That's what's important. What does Jesus making peace through the cross tell us about the work of peacemaking? You have to deny self. It can be costly. What else do you learn based off Jesus' example?
You have to humble yourself.
Absolutely have to humble yourself. If it's about you and elevating you, you are not going to get down into that situation and try to make peace, because that is messy. It's just a messy work. But you have to humble yourself. That's what Jesus did to make peace. He humbled himself by going to the point of death, even death on a cross, Paul would say. What else do you learn? Yeah, Richard?
I think one thing that we see, it's not directly said, but we have to go to a higher power if we're going to have peace. In other words, we got to go to God. God's got to be at the center, or we're not going to have peace. If we try to do it on our own by man's means, we'll never have it.
Yeah, that's a great point. If we want to have real peace in our relationships, God's going to have to be at the center of it. The peace that we have in the church, that's not our own doing, is it? Like, I can look at you, and based off what God has done for me, I can forgive you of any sin you do against me because I've been forgiven by God. I'm so amazed that God forgives me that I can forgive anybody in my life, because I realize I'm in desperate need. I know the things I've done, and He's forgiven me, so I can forgive others. And there's a peace. God's in the middle of it. You know, the peace we have as a church. But when God's at the center of a relationship, man, it helps to make peace. When He's not, I'm not saying some peace isn't possible or momentary peace, but yet when God's not involved, peace on our own accord is difficult. Because when you wrong me, instead of thinking about how God's forgiven me, I ignore that and I'm not willing to forgive you. But yet when I'm mindful of what God's done for me, how can I not forgive you? Because I'm so amazed at that. And if you look at the world today, they make moments of peace, but not necessarily lasting peace, because God's not involved. What else do you think? Jesus making peace through the cross tells us about the work of peacemaking. Any others? Yeah.
One that I heard is give people grace and be open to what is being said.
Okay, you said give people grace and be open to what?
To what they're saying, like the problem at hand.
Okay, so if we're going to make peace, we're going to have to be able to go to people and listen to a degree and have a heart of grace. Jesus comes to earth. We're going to talk about that in our sermon this morning a little bit. Jesus knows what it's like to be us, to be human. He's willing to come to earth with a heart of grace, see what the human experience is all about. Granted, he knows that anyway. He's God, but he knows it on an experiential level. But we do have to have a heart of grace if we're going to make peace with people, absolutely. Be willing to sit down, have conversations with them, man to man. Any others that you can think of? Oh, we got two. We'll go here and then we'll go back.
Sometimes it's rejected. I can do my part. Jesus did his part, but not everybody's part.
Yeah. Did you have the same thought?
I said the same thing.
Don't you hate when that happens?
Some people reject your peace. You may not even get peace in that area.
Yeah. Don't you man, I got a great answer. And it was a good answer both. And then it's like, man, she stole it. That's not fair.
Pride, submission, and vulnerability that's required. Because you can put yourself out there, the person may not.
Yeah. Two good thoughts that are connected. One is, it's not always accepted. You can go to people and try to make peace, whether that's interpersonal relationships or whether that's trying to help someone find peace with their Creator. We talk about peacemakers. I think this absolutely applies to our day-to-day relationships. Does it not apply, though, to trying to win souls for Jesus? You want to be a peacemaker? Maybe the greatest peacemaker you can be is by helping people know Jesus, to help them have peace with their God. That's being a peacemaker. But as you try to do that, does everyone always accept it? Absolutely not. So what do? Quit trying? Well, all right. I'll just, that didn't work very well, so I'll quit trying to do that. We say no, but sometimes that is what we do, right? We try to tell people about Jesus. We invite them. We encourage them. We want to talk to them. And after a few no's, sometimes we just, maybe this isn't working out. I'm not going to make peace anymore. Is that how Jesus lived? Rejected all the time. We're going to sing a song this morning. He was rejected by men, but yet he kept living, kept reaching out, kept trying to make peace. That was his goal. It's rejected very often. And it does require, you got to go to people, let down your pride, be vulnerable to try to make peace. Whether that's talking to them about Jesus or that's talking about the issues in your relationship. I'm sure for a lot of us, you went to a home sometime in the past 3 days, and there may have been some people that you kind of feel like are walking on eggshells around. Or maybe there's some conflict in a family. And we probably tried to keep the peace, and I understand why. Don't talk about those 3 subjects at the dinner table, and let's just get through this. But yet, God says, I want you to be a peacemaker. Imagine what would happen if every Christian really committed themselves to being a peacemaker, of trying to help people find peace with their God and then peace with each other. That's God's goal. That's what he does. Some of these you guys said, it's costly and messy. His effort and mission to make peace ended him on a cross, bleeding and suffering. But that mission was worth it to him because he wanted people to be right. He wanted people to be saved. He wanted people to be eternally loved and with him forever. And he was willing to pay a price, absorb pain, and he was willing to be messy. I tell you, it takes initiative. It's not reactive, it's proactive. It doesn't wait for other people to make the first move. It doesn't wait for them to admit they're wrong. A cross-shaped peacemaker takes the initiative to bridge the gap, even if the other person's still hostile. That's Jesus. That's who he was. It absorbs the hurt, as we've talked about. We want to hit back sometimes. We want to retaliate in the way that we've been hit. But peacemaking means kind of to stop the cycle of eye for an eye, absorbing the blow. And it's the courageous act to be the endpoint for bitterness that doesn't pass on to anyone else. It aims for a better relationship, a new one. That's what God does with us, and that's what he wants us to do with others. And this ministry that he has of reconciliation that he lived, he has now given to you and I. He wants us to be people who go out with it and have a ministry of reconciliation ourselves, trying to win people back, trying to make peace in their life, to be a peacemaker. Can you think of any passages? Oh, yes, Cheryl.
I was just thinking when he sent them out to do the mission, he said they're going to reject you, but they're really not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And the same thing, a lot of times when you're new at studying the Bible with someone, you get so hurt thinking, I didn't do it right, something's wrong with me. Instead of realizing that not everybody's going to accept the word and they're not going to accept Christ.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of times people give up trying to study with somebody because they feel like, I didn't do it right, I'm not good enough to teach this. And we need to remember that not everybody's going to want to follow Christ just like they didn't in the first century.
Yeah, not everyone's going to want to follow. You're going to be rejected, but it's not necessarily you. That's not who they're rejecting when you're trying to share Jesus with someone. That's true. Absolutely true. Can you think of any teachings of Jesus, maybe even in this sermon that we're studying right now, that you would say that section, that teaching is being a peacemaker? Can you think of any of those? Because if you want to know how important this was to Jesus, I think you read his teachings and you go, there are other things Jesus said that involve being a peacemaker. Can you think of any? That many, huh? None. All right, cool. All right, well, we're going to end it right there. No. Did you have your hand up?
Romans 12:18 talks about as much as is possible with you.
Yeah.
Live at peace, and that vengeance belongs to God.
Yeah, vengeance belongs to the Lord, but as much as it is possible, live peaceably with all men. As much as it is possible. I know that sometimes it's not possible, but yet, as every bit that is in our control, he says, you aim to live peaceably with people, all men. Yeah. Yes.
Another time that he was talking about helping them remember peace was when he told them, if the Romans tell you to go 1 mile, you go 2.
Yeah.
Try to make the extra effort to bridge that gap.
Yeah. If they ask you to go 1 mile, go 2. You know, your cloak and your tunic also, that's in this sermon. I mean, that's peacemaking. Jesus would say, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. That's peacemaking. Even what we call the golden rule, do unto others as you. In some ways, that's peacemaking. Jesus was very, very concerned with peacemaking. That's how he lived. And as Christians, we should do the same. Any other hands that I'm missing?
He also, in the Sermon on the Mount, gets to the heart. The law says, thou shalt not kill, but if you hate your brother,
Yeah.
you murder him in your heart. If you lust after a woman, you've committed adultery in your heart. It starts with us on the inside.
Yeah.
Not just the manifestation of the actions. That was how the old law was applied.
Yeah, which kind of goes back to what James would say about what's the source of all of the issues and conflict and whatnot. Well, it's passions, it's something within you. And Jesus does get to the heart. In fact, he would say, you've heard said, do not murder. Imagine walking around, by the way, thinking, well, we're at peace because we don't kill each other. And yet, within you, you hate one another. And we laugh at that, but yet sometimes as people, we walk around and, I didn't necessarily say it out loud, but in here it was there. Or I didn't physically do anything, but in our heart there's hatred, and that's not peace. And so you're absolutely right that as he does you've heard it said, but I say unto you, a lot of that is kind of about peacemaking in a way too. Yes?
Yes, I noticed a lot of things that Jesus said was self-denial. Everything that he was telling us was deny yourself and to go to the cross, and to turn the other cheek. So it's basically denying yourself. You're dead.
Yeah. It's a denial of self that's required, which we kind of talked about this a few times every week, but some people view the Beatitudes as like stepping stones. If you're going to deny yourself and really try to be a peacemaker, I think, one, you got to realize you're poor in spirit, you're in need. You got to mourn your sin. You got to realize you have to hunger and thirst for righteousness. You have to be pure of heart, pure-minded, focused on God. When you do those things, it would lead you to be a peacemaker. Yeah, Martin.
I think that was a really interesting point. Something I really never considered. We always focus on the peace that we have in interacting with other people, but sometimes that peace is within, and it's the warring members inside of us. I think that's a really cool point.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to be at peace with others when we're not at peace within ourselves. That is a very interesting point. Yeah.
Sometimes, in some of his teachings, it's a little subtle, but like the parable of the Good Samaritan, indirectly, what was he saying? There needs to be peace between here's the Samaritan. What's he doing?
Yeah.
He's showing God's love to an enemy.
Yeah. He's talking about the parable of the Good Samaritan. He's showing how he desires peace in all these relationships, despite the barriers and the oppositions and everything else. But that's an example of peace. Absolutely. Do I have another? We talk about that second part of the statement. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And you could talk about what does that mean to be called sons of God. I would just submit to you a little bit this, that when you kind of step into the mess, when you try to be peacemakers with people, whether it's their relationship with God or even with other men, Jesus says you'll be called sons of God. The wording here, the language it's used, it's not children of God, it's sons of God. And from what I've studied, when you were called a son in Jewish times, they kind of had a particular meaning to them. Like to say that you were the son of someone was kind of used to connect a person to a particular attribute. You think about, he's the carpenter's son, or he's this person's son. It kind of connected you to them or a certain attribute. I think what you're seeing here, when he says you'll be called sons of God, is that when you are a peacemaker, when you try to make peace, you are like your Father. You are like your God. You have his attributes. You ever looked at a boy and be like, man, you're so much like your dad. You're so much like your father. When you are a peacemaker, he's saying, you are like your Father. You're showing those characteristics. And can you imagine, by the way, how cool would that be? Could you imagine if God told you, you look a lot like me? Just your qualities. Isn't that like the greatest compliment you can ever be given? You're acting a lot like me. And that's what he says happens when we're a peacemaker. And so I guess what I want to encourage you today is that there are a lot of circumstances and difficulties in our life, in our interpersonal relationships, because we're human and conflicts happen. Be a peacemaker. Not a peacekeeper, be a peacemaker. Try your best to make peace with people, with family and with friends and with coworkers. Try your best to be a peacemaker. Be active, take initiative to help people have peace with their God, to share Jesus. Try your best to bring about peace in the world to those who are hurting or marginalized or in difficult circumstances. You can help bring peace to them. When there's injustice that's done, be a peacemaker, because that's who Jesus was. That's who our Father is, and we can be like him. Any thoughts or questions as we close this morning? 3 at the same time. That was awesome. Popcorn reading. We'll go right to left. We're just going to do this, okay?
Going back to what the cross teaches us about peace, we have to, this is, I'm preaching to myself here, we have to remember the importance of prayer. I think we learn a lot from how Jesus prepared for the cross, and that priestly prayer in the garden was a lot about peace.
Yeah.
And unity, and he prayed on the cross. I always think about Philippians 4:7, how we get peace is bringing everything to God through prayer and supplication. We're not going to have peace in our life, inside ourselves or outside ourselves, without a proper prayer life with God. I think that's, again, like I said, I'm really preaching to myself here. This is something I have to remember.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's good thought. Who was here? Cheryl?
When he said, love your enemies, we're like God, because it said, in that while you were yet sinners,
Yeah.
he loved us and sent his son, not because we were great, but because we were doing things against him.
Yeah. Loving your enemy. That's being like, absolutely being like God. I think we had, was it Bill? No? Someone here? Huh? Well, far over. Jack?
James 3:17 and 18. This pretty much covers everything you spent an hour on. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, good fruit, impartial, and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace raise a harvest of righteousness.
Yeah. said in that book. It's a good passage. Any other thoughts as we close there? All right, well, be a peacemaker. Thanks for being here, and we'll pick it back up for worship.
Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame.